When it comes to RV life, I think we can all agree there's one thing that we can be sure of. Eventually something's going to break. And that's what we're dealing with today. We've got a bedroom slide out that's having some issues. So if you've got the Exact Slide cable system in one of your slide outs, then you're going to want to stick around and see just what this system looks like, how it comes apart, and how you can access all the components should you need a repair. A couple of quick things before we dive into this. Today we're specifically looking at the Exact Slide cable slide system. Now there's two different kinds of cable slide systems. This particular, the Exact Slide system, which is a system where the motors and the gearbox and everything is built into the wall. And then there's an AccuSlide system where the motor, the gear drive, the chain, and everything is exposed and attached to the outside of the wall. Now, how do you know which system you have? Number one, the easiest way to identify that is with the slide out open, go out and take a look and see if there's any stickers on the bulb seal at the bottom of the slide out on either side that'll say Exact Slide slide system like this does here. If those stickers happen to be absent, another quick way to tell, with the slide out in, take a look above the slide out behind all your trim. If you see a motor and a chain and gears and cables exposed on the outside of the wall, then you have the AccuSlide system. Now, today, since I've never tore into a system like this, I've got a mobile tech coming to take care of this problem for me. For us being full-time, we really don't have that luxury of dropping off our rig, walking away for however length of time it takes that dealership to get to it. So we use a mobile tech whenever we can. Now, how do we find a mobile tech? Stick around to the end of the video and I'll show you how we find a mobile tech for the area that we happen to be in at the time, how quick and easy that process really is. Okay, so real quick, what happened? We stopped at a rest stop to use the restroom, and Tina came back to the truck and said, there's something wrong with that dresser slide. It's making an awful noise. So, great. So I went back, ran the slide, and of course, I didn't hear anything that sounded funny. And she said, just wait, it's going to happen as soon as it gets to the end of the cycle. And sure enough, as soon as it got to the end of the cycle, it sounded like a gun went off, or somebody hit the outside of the coach with a sledgehammer or something. And it happened when it got to the end of the cycle on the way out and again on the way in. So like, all right, great, it's in, we can get to where we're going, we'll deal with it when we get there. And we were kind of apprehensive of whether we wanted to run the slide at all when we got there, but I'm like, okay, we're here for 3 weeks, we'll get a tech out here, open it up, we can at least live and not be inconvenienced with the slide in. So let's dig into what this thing looks like and what it takes to expose all the components. So what we're dealing with specifically is we're going to be replacing a motor and a gear drive. This part right here is what we're going to have to replace. The mobile tech came out, did his initial analysis, ran the slide, figured out what parts we were going to need. So the part is here, and what we're going to replace is the motor and the gear drive. And so in order to get to that, a lot has to come apart. Okay, while the tech is setting up, I'm going to show you this slide out. This is a very similar slide out than one we're going to be working on. This one just happens to be in the kitchen. It's about the same slide out size as we have in the bedroom that we're going to be working on, our wardrobe slide. And so we're going to run this in, and I'm going to show you what this is supposed to look like and sound like when it comes in. So we're going to run it in. As you can see, everything's coming in nice and even. Both sides are coming in at the same rate. Okay, now that this slide is in, let's take a look at what we're dealing with. Like I said, this is the Exact Slide system where the motors are built into the wall. And you can see this right here. It's got a channel, a metal channel that covers it up, and you've got just screws on the wall down here, and this is going to come right off. And behind this is the motor and a gear drive, and then you've got your cables. Now your cables we're going to talk about just real briefly. You should only be able to move them about 1/4 of an inch, and that's about the right adjustment. So if you ever have to adjust one, you don't tighten them up so much that they don't move, because that's going to cause you problems. So the tech's getting his tools out. He's going to start taking this thing apart, and we'll take a look at what that looks like. Okay, just take a quick look at where he's at so far. As you can see, Everything has to come apart to get this system out. So on this side, in order to get this motor out and this gearbox that's bad, the whole system has to come out. And so far inside, he's done taking everything out, the fascia off, the brackets that hold the cables on have to come off, and the rest is going to be done from the outside. So in order to get all this assembly out, everything from the outside is going to have to come out as well. So to access this from both sides, these bulb seals are going to have to come out, and all of the framework that holds them bulb seals in is going to have to come out as well. To remove the bulb seals, there's a retention screw at the top and the bottom of the bulb seal. Remove those and simply just slide the bulb seal right out of its channel. This will expose the screws that'll need to be removed now to get the whole assembly out. All right, and so once he gets that rail that the bulb seal was sliding into loose, everything pulls loose and everything comes out, including all the stink bugs that we picked up in the Midwest while we were...
Oh yeah, one of them is right here.
So maybe we'll be done with the stink bugs after all this comes out. Okay, now that it's out of the coach and laying on the table, you can see all of the components are attached to the framework, so everything comes out, lays on the bench or the table, and whatever part you're replacing or working on is easily accessible. You know, in today's case, it's going to be this motor and gear drive, and in order to get that out, it's simply remove these two bolts with an Allen wrench, and you're going to need a partner to help you a little bit, and you'll see here in a second when the motor goes back in to pull these cables.
Top cables to give us slack to pull the chain up, and then
okay, in the moment of truth, what this gear is going to look like. It doesn't look bad, so the damage is probably internal.
So there's some sort of locking washer internally that on this end is very close, on this end is very far. So something has definitely shifted within the gearbox.
So something failed within the gearbox. So if we rotate that, you can actually see how, and I'm going to use a very technical term here, cattywampus this gear is, and the shaft coming out of the gearbox. So something failed internally. So because this is now garbage, at some point we'll take this apart and see what it looks like, and we'll show this at the end of the video. So if you really want to see what really happened, you have to stick around to the end. So let's take a look at both of them together. You can see the one on the right, the bad one, how that gear is, again, very technical term, cattywampus. It's just kind of in there crooked, if you will. So again, something failed internally there.
Grinding going on the actual bracket of where the motor sits, and it's dug in there pretty like deep, yeah. Yep. Go. Tight. Tighter. Perfect.
All right, so we're going to put this thing back in, slide it in. So once you slide the unit back in place, it's just a matter of screwing everything back together, and those bulb seals are going to go back, slide back on, and then we'll just recaulk everything so that we don't have any leaks. And then he'll go back inside and start putting everything back together, and we'll get this thing synced up and see how things go. Okay, as you can see behind me, he's putting everything back together, basically in reverse of how he took everything out. He's going to be adjusting the cables here in a minute, and I'll try to get in over his shoulder and show you how that process looks and how he goes about that. Adjusting cables might be something that the average RV owner could do themselves, but this whole project, I don't recommend this as a DIY project. Okay, so when it comes to adjusting the cables on these Exact Slide systems, what you're going to want to do is on both ends of the slide out, have them on the in position here, and the measurements match. So if the other end is, say, in 8 inches, you want this one to measure 8 inches. And then you're going to snug that cable up and give it about, what, about a 1/4 inch of play?
Yes, sir. 1/4 inch should be good enough.
You don't want to snug them up so tight that you don't have any movement in there, because that's going to put too much tension on and possibly cause problems that we just fixed.
Yes, it will cause the cable to snap completely.
Yeah, so, and that's another catastrophic failure you don't want to have to deal with. So he's going to get these adjusted and then start putting trim back together, and then we're going to see how things go. All right, so now we're done. So that whole project took about 3 hours to replace that motor and that gearbox just on one side of the slide box. I think it would have been a little quicker than that, but the tech was gracious enough to let me follow him around with a camera, explain to me what he was doing and how things worked. So a shout out to Joseph and Karen and Goldsmith's RV Mobile Repair down here in Florida. They were awesome. And so there's a couple of points I want to make that I didn't make during this video. Number one is we were fortunate enough with this repair that this particular slide out, it happened on the end of the slide out that we had access to it with the slide in. In a lot of cases with these smaller slide boxes like bed slides, dresser slides, things like that, there's going to be a wall on each side. With us having that access, he didn't have to take all the fascia off to get to it. In a case where there's a wall on each side, you're going to have to take all the trim off and all the fascia off to get to access to where the cables tie into the box and get that jam off, so that all that stuff can be undone to get that whole assembly out. Another thing that we didn't talk about was syncing up those motors after the repair is done. So there's a motor and a gearbox on each end of the slide box, and they operate independently, but they have to be synced up together so that that slide moves in and out evenly, because you don't want that slide box to come in dog tracking and uneven, because that could either cause damage to the slide box eventually or get some of the system like the pulleys and the cables out of line and cause damage to that. I didn't cover syncing them up because once I got planning that part of the video, there were so many more things to cover that it was just going to make this video far too long. So be sure and subscribe to the channel, hit that bell to be notified, and watch for the next video to come out, because I'm going to cover not only how to sync up those motors so that they're working properly and working together, but I'll cover some troubleshooting things and how to override the system and things like that. So be sure and watch for that video. Another thing about this slide box, it's only 12 inches deep, so we really didn't have to shore anything up on the outside once it was out and things came apart. If you've got a full depth slide out, that's another thing that you're going to want to consider, is how to shore up that in some way so that slide box doesn't fall out of the coach when you're taking all the fascia off, if you have to do that. You know, and this video was never really intended to be an instructional video as much as it was to show you guys what's involved in a repair like this and what's inside your walls and how that system works. Early in the video I told you that I would tell you how we find a mobile tech when we're on the road. We're down here in Florida when this repair was necessary, and for us it's easy to find a mobile tech. As a Keystone owner, Keystone has an app out called the My Keystone app that they put together a few years ago to just have a library of resources, of DIY videos, resources for finding dealers, looking at maybe new floor plans, or just getting information. And the whole purpose of that was to just help us all camp better. So that makes our life really easy when it comes to finding resources or finding mobile techs like that when we're on the road. And the easy way to do that is you're just going to open up the app and you're going to go to find a dealer, put in the zip code or the name of the town wherever you're at, and the mobile techs will show up in that list of dealers. The difference between the mobile techs and the dealerships is the mobile tech will show up with a red banner above it like I'm showing you here on the screen. So if you want a more in-depth look at that app, I did a video when it first came out or first was made available, a quick overview of it, and you can access that by clicking this card up here. So anybody who's a Keystone owner probably already knows about this app, but you might not realize how many resources are really packed into that thing. And you don't even have to be a Keystone owner to access that app and use it. Anybody can do that. That's how we find our resources quick and easy when we're on the road. So what I'm going to do now to finish up this video is we're going to tear this motor and gearbox apart and see if we can figure out just what happened and what failed. We already know that something internally failed in that gearbox. We're going to take it apart, show you what it looks like, and see if we can figure out what might have caused that. But if nothing else, see what broke. Okay, so let's do an autopsy on this thing, see if we can figure out what went wrong or why it went wrong. So as we showed you earlier, this gear, you can see clearly, is in there crooked. Something's bent or something's out of line. We really suspected that these gears were going to be sheared off when we pulled it apart, and in fact they weren't. So we know it, wherever the failure was, it's internal to this gearbox. So to take the gearbox apart and separate the motor, there's 4 screws holding the motor to the gearbox, and then we have 6 screws on the back here. So let's get these off the back, and I'm going to leave the motor on for now, just so if there's something there, it's still in place when we take this plate off, and we can see if something's broke there. So we'll get these screws out. Okay, so the only thing holding this sprocket on is a snap ring, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that off now, because I don't know if it's going to be required to take that off to split the case apart. Hopefully this just, yep, it just slides right off. And the gear itself looks good, so we know everything's internal. So we're going to flip this over and see, take a little screwdriver and see how much it's going to take to, okay, it's coming apart pretty easily. I don't really know what to expect in here as far as ball bearings or anything like that, so I'm going to take it off kind of gingerly to keep everything intact. Okay, lots of grease. They certainly didn't spare any of that. Okay, so this is a series of 3 different gears in here. If you can see that. Hopefully the camera's picking it up pretty good. So you have a worm gear in here from the motor that's driving this first one, which drives the second, which is a little bigger, and then the third one. Let's pull that one out. So far I don't see anything that's too hinky other than this is in here bent, and I'm not sure what's causing that at this point. Oh, here we go. So the gears on the bottom of this one that actually turn the gear that drives the actual gear for the chain on the outside, get it up here, see if you guys can see this. It is completely stripped out, down to almost nothing left, if you can see that. So obviously that's a problem, but why this is bent, I'm going to turn it around and see if the camera picks it up and let you guys see how this is. It's bent that way, and I can actually see already before I pull this out. I'm going to turn this over. If you look, this whole hole looks like it's out of round. So I'm going to pull this out so we can see what we're dealing with here. Okay, those gears are stripped off a little bit on that one, not as much as the smaller gear, but enough obviously to cause a problem. But nothing looks bent on this shaft or this gear at all. But then when I look at, so the housing of this, you can see that. Hopefully you can. I'm going to try to position it so the camera can see it pretty good. It's out of round. You can see a whole gap right here. This bearing, or this race, is actually a bearing. And I don't know if you can see it on the camera. I'll angle it. So it's pressed in flush here, but it's not flush there. So that whole race or bearing is in there crooked. So what caused that, I'm not really sure. But if I turn it over on this side, you can see better. I'll wipe it off a little more. You can actually see right here where the hole in the housing or the case itself, where this bearing is pressed into, is out of round. So, I mean, it doesn't look like, this part doesn't spin at all because what the shaft spins inside of it. So it looks more like this is a defective part, and that's what caused all this. When this thing was pressed in there crooked, it just took some time to wear those gears down and eventually just fail. What it looks like is a defective part from BAL, the company who makes the slide system. I would think that if the cables were too tight, we would see more wear on the inside of that bearing, which we don't. And it just looks like it's in there crooked, and that was machined wrong. So what it comes down to is BAL sent a bad part. Hopefully this one that they put in is a better part. So thanks for watching, guys. We appreciate you coming along to see this little episode of failed parts, and hope you join us on the next video. Be sure and subscribe and hit the bell and watch for that next video where we'll show you guys how to sync this up and how to troubleshoot a slide out and issues like that. So catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.